Hello, friend. How are you today? I hope you're finding peace in this moment, because today I need to share something with you. Something that still sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. You know that feeling when you think you're being clever? When you believe you've got everyone figured out and you're just one step ahead of the game. Well, sometimes our own cleverness becomes the very knife that cuts through everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Have you ever told a lie so small, so innocent, that you convinced yourself it was harmless, maybe even justified? I have. And I watched that tiny deception grow into something that would shatter the very foundation of my world. This is a story about trust, about the dangerous games we play when we think we can test the people we love, and about discovering that sometimes the biggest secrets aren't the ones other people keep from us, but the ones we've been living without even knowing it. So take a deep breath, settle in close, and let's walk through this journey together. Because what happened to Maria will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to your heart. Are you ready? Let's begin. Meet Maria, 19 years old, but sometimes she feels like she's been carrying the weight of a much older soul. Every morning she wakes up in the same small bedroom she's had since she was 12, staring at the same ceiling that's witnessed every dream, every tear, every sleepless night of wondering if she'll ever be enough. While most college sophomores are discovering themselves in dorm rooms and late-night adventures, Maria still lives at home. Not because she has to, but because somewhere deep inside, she's still searching for something she can't quite name. Something that feels missing. She has this routine, you know? Coffee first, always black, standing by the kitchen window watching the world wake up. She scrolls through social media like it's a morning prayer, but instead of finding inspiration, she finds herself counting all the ways other people's lives seem more complete than hers. People see Maria as the quiet one, the thoughtful sister, the one who remembers birthdays and notices when someone gets a haircut. She's smart, observant, maybe too observant for her own good. Her family loves her, but there's this invisible space she occupies, always slightly outside the circle, always watching, always analyzing. But here's what nobody sees. Behind those careful eyes and that gentle smile, Maria carries this ache, this feeling that everyone around her is living in a story she doesn't quite belong to. She watches her older sister Emma navigate life with such confidence, such certainty, and Maria wonders, when will it be her turn to feel that sure about anything? She doesn't know it yet, but that ache, that feeling of being on the outside looking in, is about to lead her down a path that will change everything she thought she knew about belonging. Maria's days had a rhythm to them, like a song played on repeat. Classes at the community college 3 days a week, her part-time job at the local bookstore on weekends, and evenings spent in the soft glow of her laptop screen, pretending to study but really just existing. She had this way of moving through the world quietly, always wearing those comfortable oversized sweaters that made her feel safe, carrying the same worn canvas bag her grandmother gave her, earbuds always ready to escape into music when conversations got too loud or too real. The barista at her favorite coffee shop knew her order by heart: medium iced coffee, extra shot, oat milk. And Maria found comfort in that small recognition. At home, dinner was at 6:30 sharp. Their family had this tradition, you know, everyone gathered around the same wooden table that had seen thousands of meals, thousands of conversations. Maria would sit in her usual spot, across from Emma, listening to her sister talk about her job at the marketing firm, her weekend plans with James, her latest accomplishment. Their parents would beam with pride, asking follow-up questions, celebrating every small victory. And Maria? She'd contribute when asked, share a funny story from the bookstore, mention a Hest she'd passed, but mostly she was the listener, the observer, the one who noticed that Emma always touched James's hand when she laughed, that their father's eyes lit up differently when Emma spoke, that their mothers saved the best stories for when Emma was around. After dinner, while Emma and James would disappear to watch movies or plan their next adventure, Maria would retreat to her room. She'd scroll through Instagram, watching everyone else's highlight reels, Emma's posts with James at trendy restaurants, her college friends traveling to places Maria had only seen in photos, couples holding hands against perfect sunsets. There was this ache that had become as familiar as breathing. Not jealousy exactly, but this deep wondering about when her life would start feeling like it belonged to her, when she'd stop feeling like she was waiting for permission to be happy, to be seen, to matter in the way that seemed to come so naturally to everyone else. The funny thing is, Maria thought she knew her place in the world, thought she understood the story she was living. She had no idea that sometimes the most ordinary days are just the calm before everything you believed about your life gets turned completely upside down. It started with something so small, so insignificant, that Maria almost missed it entirely. She was scrolling through Instagram on a Tuesday night, that familiar routine of watching other people's lives unfold in perfect squares, when she saw it. James had liked a photo. Not just any photo, a picture of a girl Maria had never seen before. Beautiful, confident, everything Maria felt she wasn't. But it wasn't just the like, it was the timestamp, 2 a.m. While Emma was fast asleep beside him, James was awake, scrolling, appreciating someone else's beauty in the quiet darkness. Maria stared at her phone screen until her eyes burned. Her heart started beating in this strange, erratic rhythm, like it was trying to tell her something her mind didn't want to hear. She told herself it meant nothing. People like photos all the time. It's meaningless, innocent. But then she started noticing other things. The way James's phone was always face down during family dinners, how he'd step outside to take certain calls, the slight hesitation in his voice when Emma would ask about his day. Small things, tiny cracks in what everyone believed was the perfect relationship. The doubt crept in like water through those cracks, slow at first, then rushing, flooding every quiet moment with questions that made her stomach twist. Was Emma living a lie? Was everyone just pretending not to see what Maria was starting to see? Or worse, was Maria imagining things, creating problems that didn't exist because she couldn't stand watching her sister have something beautiful? That's when the idea whispered itself into existence, so quiet at first, she almost didn't recognize it as her own thought. What if she could know for sure? What if she could test him just once, just to prove to herself that her suspicions were wrong, that Emma really did have the perfect boyfriend, the perfect life, and Maria was just being the jealous little sister everyone probably thought she was anyway? The plan formed itself with terrifying clarity. A fake profile, a different name, A few carefully chosen photos that would make her seem like exactly the kind of girl who might catch James's attention. She'd message him, see if he responded. And when he didn't, because of course he wouldn't, because he loved Emma, she'd finally be able to quiet the voice in her head that was making her question everything. It seemed so simple, so harmless, just a test, just proof that love like Emma and James had was real. Maria had no idea she was about to pull on a thread that would unravel not just their relationship, but the entire fabric of everything she thought. Creating Sophia felt like stepping into someone else's skin. Maria spent hours choosing the perfect photos. Not too perfect, not too obvious, just believable. A girl who looked confident but approachable. Someone James might actually notice. Someone who wasn't Maria. The first message she sent was simple, innocent. Just a response to one of his stories about his favorite coffee shop. Her hands were shaking as she typed it, her heart pounding as she hit send. And then, nothing. Hours of nothing. Relief and disappointment washing over her in equal waves. But then, late that night, a notification lit up her phone. He had responded. Not just responded, he had written paragraphs about coffee, about his favorite places in the city, about how rare it was to find someone who appreciated the small things. The conversation flowed so naturally, so easily, that Maria found herself forgetting this was supposed to be a test. Days turned into weeks. Sophia and James talked about everything. His dreams of starting his own business someday, his fears about not being good enough, his thoughts about life, about love, about the future. Things Emma had never mentioned. Things Maria realized Emma might not even know. And that's when the ground beneath Maria's feet started to crack. She was sitting in her room one evening, reading their latest conversation, when James mentioned something that made her blood run cold. He talked about her father, about how he'd always reminded him of someone from his past, about connections that didn't make sense, about family histories that seemed incomplete. Maria stared at the words until they blurred. She read them again and again. A strange feeling settled in her chest, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit but somehow belonged. That night, she couldn't sleep. She found herself standing in the hallway outside her parents' bedroom, listening to the sound of their breathing, wondering if the people she'd called family her entire life were keeping secrets she'd never even thought to question. She started noticing things she'd never paid attention to before. Old photo albums with gaps where pictures should have been. Documents in her father's desk drawer with dates that didn't add up. Conversations that stopped when she entered the room. The way her mother's eyes would get distant sometimes. When Emma talked about childhood memories, Maria couldn't quite recall the same way. The catfishing had started as a way to expose someone else's lies. But Maria didn't sleep for 3 days. She moved through her house like a detective in her own life, searching for clues to a mystery she was only beginning to understand. Every drawer, every box, every forgotten corner held the possibility of answers. And then she found it, hidden in the back of her mother's jewelry box, behind rings and necklaces that held decades of memories, was a letter. The paper was soft with age, the ink slightly faded, but the words, the words changed everything. It was addressed to her mother, dated 20 years ago, from a man Maria had never heard of. A man who wrote about love, about difficult choices, about a child he would never be able to raise, but would always carry in his heart. A child he hoped would grow up knowing she was wanted, even if she never knew his name. Maria's hands trembled as she read her own story, written in a stranger's handwriting. This man, her biological father, wasn't a mystery or a mistake. He was a person who had loved her before she was even born, who had made the painful decision to step aside so she could have a stable family. But the letter revealed something else, something that made Maria's breath catch in her throat. James's last name was mentioned, not as a coincidence, but as a connection. This man, her biological father, was James's uncle. James hadn't been flirting with Sophia or planning to cheat on Emma. He had been talking to someone he thought was a stranger, but somehow, impossibly, he had been talking to his own cousin, the girl his family had wondered about for years, the girl they had watched from a distance, respecting the choice that had been made before she was born. The catfishing, the deception, the elaborate plan to expose unfaithfulness, it had all led Maria exactly where she was meant to be, to the truth about herself, to the realization that love sometimes looks like letting go, and family sometimes extends beyond the boundaries we think we understand. In that quiet moment, holding a letter written by a father she'd never known, Maria understood something profound. She hadn't discovered a lie. She had discovered a different kind of love, one that had been protecting her, guiding her, surrounding her, all along, even when she felt most alone. The girl who thought she was testing someone else's heart had found her own. The conversation Maria had with her family that night was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Sitting around that same wooden table where she'd spent years feeling invisible, she placed the letter in the center and watched as decades of carefully kept secrets finally came into the light. Her mother cried, not the gentle tears Maria had seen before, but deep, soul-shaking sobs that seemed to carry 20 years of guilt and love and impossible choices. Her father, the man who had raised her, who had chosen to be her dad every single day, reached across the table and held her hand with a grip that said everything words couldn't. Emma's reaction surprised her most. Her perfect sister, the one who seemed to glide through life without struggle, broke down completely. "I've been carrying this secret since I was old enough to understand," she whispered. "I thought it would protect you, but it was slowly eating me alive." Even James, when he arrived later that evening, looked like he'd been holding his breath for years. "My family talked about you all the time," he told Maria, softly. "Uncle David never stopped wondering if you were happy, if you were loved, if you knew that giving you up was the hardest thing he'd ever done." The healing didn't happen overnight. Trust, once shaken, doesn't rebuild itself with a single conversation. But something fundamental had shifted. The invisible walls that had kept Maria feeling like an outsider in her own family began to crumble. She started small. Instead of hiding in her room after dinner, she stayed at the table, asking questions about her biological father, about the decision that had shaped her entire life. She learned that love sometimes looks like sacrifice, and family sometimes means choosing what's best for someone else, even when it breaks your heart. Maria reached out to her biological father. The first phone call lasted 3 hours. His voice was gentle, full of wonder and tears, and 20 years of stored-up love. They made plans to meet, to build something new from the foundation of what had always been there. The girl who had started this journey, trying to expose deception, had discovered something far more precious. She had found her way home, to herself. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves about our lives are just that. Stories. Maria thought she was living in a tale of being overlooked, of being less than, of watching everyone else get the love she was searching for. But the truth was, she had been surrounded by love all along. She just couldn't see it through the lens of the story she'd created. We all do this, don't we? We write ourselves into narratives that make us the victim, the outsider, the one who doesn't quite belong. We look at other people's lives and assume they have something we're missing. We test, and we doubt, and we search for proof that the love around us isn't real, isn't enough, isn't meant for us. But Maria's journey taught her something beautiful. Sometimes, the very act of looking for deception leads us straight to the truth we needed to find. Sometimes the people we think are keeping secrets from us are actually protecting something precious. And sometimes the family we're born into isn't the only family that's been loving us all along. The most profound discovery Maria made wasn't about James or Emma, or even about her biological father. It was about herself. She learned that belonging isn't something you find by proving you're worthy of it. It's something you accept when you finally understand that you always were. Take a moment tonight, after this story settles in your heart, and look around at your own life. Are there stories you've been telling yourself that might not be the whole truth? Are there people loving you in ways you haven't noticed because you've been looking for love to arrive in a different package? Maria's fake profile led her to her real family. Her attempt to expose a lie revealed the most beautiful truth of all: that love, real love, sometimes looks like sacrifice, protection, and patience that spans decades. Thank you for walking through this journey with me today. May you find the courage to question your own stories, and may you discover the love that's been there all along.